I am here with someone who has auditioned for X Factor Australia, but sadly didn't make it that far. Sophie Gonzales. For those who don't know you, please introduce yourself.
Whoa, that's a beautiful introduction. I might have to steal that for myself in future. My name is Sophie Gonzales. I'm a young adult author. I generally write queer rom-coms, and I'm the author of Only Mercy Devastated and Perfect on Paper, and I'm located in Adelaide, Australia.
That's very good. When did you first start writing?
Probably five was when I started. I used to use my mum. She would have to type it out for me because I was not a particularly good typer back then. We used to have those big white 90s computers where we would there was like one program on the computer, so we would type out my stories on that. I think beyond that, I started writing pretty regularly from about the age of 11. I used to write fan fiction online, and it kind of went from there, and then I transitioned into my original stuff moving forward. So probably about just under 20 years now. That makes me feel old to say.
That's very good. What kind of stuff did you write fan fiction about?
I started out in Harry Potter fan fiction, actually. I used to write about Harry Potter's parents and their time at Hogwarts. And that was really the only fan fiction area that I was in. That it was quite new at the time. I think we're talking like 2005, 2004 sort of
Oh,
era. So I think it was, yeah, there wasn't very much to choose from back then. So I kind of moved on to original fiction probably about the age of 12, 13. I used to write on a website called Fiction Press, which is still up and about. It's kind of like the OG Wattpad, I think you could describe it.
wow, that's very good. I might take a look at that. Why did you decide to start writing fiction?
I don't think there was ever a moment where I decided per se. I always just sort of did it. When I was young, I would tell stories with my Barbie dolls or with my toys. And I think, a lot of kids do that. Acting it out, you'd have your characters and your like beginning, middle, and end, and it would all be very dramatic. Usually one Barbie at least would die. And moving forward, I started telling those stories with drawings. So I would have, a big stack of paper, almost like massive comic strips, and I would just draw out the scenes like that. And then when I was able to write, I kind of just naturally transitioned to that. I guess if we're talking about a time when I realized that that was something that I could potentially be good at, I would probably say it was in primary school. We had an author visit, and he was just absolutely wonderful. And he went through this activity with us where he got us all to write a story about our pets. And when I read out my story, he was just very, very enthusiastic and lovely. And he made a really big deal about being able to picture me in a bookshop one day. And that's the first time I'd ever been told something like that. And I was like, wow, I really quite like the idea of that. And I suppose he was either psychic or set that in motion because that's where we ended up.
That's very interesting. Would it be a famous author or was it just an author that people wouldn't know?
Um, it's quite sad because I remember he was one of the Aussie Nibbles authors. There was a series of books where every book had a different author, and the series is called Aussie Nibbles, and it was just like every story was, like quite short. And I have Googled it and hunted down as much as I could who this author was, and I've never been able to find his name. And I would love to know that because I would love to be able to reach out and actually say, hi, you probably don't remember me, but I remember you. Yeah, so maybe one day someone will end up remembering who it was, and that would be really fantastic.
I hope for that to happen too. Um, as some people know already, you're also a psychologist. What's it like being a psychologist in fiction?
Well, there's a lot of the role of psychology, and particularly the study of psychology, that really helps when it comes to writing fiction. I suppose, you know, there's a lot of skills that are similar. It's the interest in people, it's the interest in how their brains work. And certainly when I was studying at university, there's a lot of theories that I would come across, and I think it helped me understand how people who are different from me, who think differently from me, might go about making decisions. But at the same time, it's kind of a balance that you have to strike, because obviously patient confidentiality is absolutely paramount. So at the forefront of my mind is always, you know, everything that happens in a room stays in that room. So, you know, obviously it wouldn't even cross my mind to ever use something that was discussed in a room in fiction, but you also have to be very aware of, even if something is fictional, you have to make sure that there's no way that anyone could ever think that this did come from something that you discussed. You know, sometimes I'll have to go out of my way to make sure that, okay, this might be treading a little bit too close. I would rather not include this, just in case someone were to think that that was something to do with them when it absolutely wasn't. But then, sorry, I was just going to say as well, as a psychologist, I do work with young people, and generally young people, and I think that really helps, because I'm writing for children, and it gives me a little bit of insight as to just the general things that children go through, the kind of general worries that they might have, and also what their life is like, what kind of things are happening around them. It kind of places me in an observer role, where, you know, I suppose I'm lucky to have things explained to me in a way so that I can really understand where people are coming from, and that gives me some information as to what the world is like for a teenager at the moment.
Do any of your patients ever recognize you or not from
Not
your?
yet.
That's okay.
Not
They
yet.
probably
No.
will someday.
Maybe I'm not famous enough that.
Is there any piece of advice you would give to young writers?
I think the best advice that I can give is to not write with the intention to publish necessarily, not at first. I personally wrote for about, well, you know, I started writing pretty regularly at about the age of 11, and it wasn't until 21 or so that I started seriously wanting to pursue publications. That was 10 years. And those 10 years were really, really important years, because not only did they teach me how to write a book and how to develop that skill, because it is a skill, you need to practice it, but it really allowed me to learn what I like to write and to enjoy it. I think when you start writing with any kind of intention, writing for the market, writing for a publisher, writing for readers, you do lose a little bit, in some sense, of the freedom that comes with writing exactly what you want to write. So don't rush into that. Let yourself write what entertains you. And don't worry about other people reading it for a while, until you do get to that stage where you're like, actually, I think that I am ready. And, you know, that happens to everyone at different ages. Some people sit down and write a book and they happen to publish it. But I think that there's a lot of value in writing just for yourself, that I think shouldn't be underestimated.
That's very interesting and good to consider. What are your favorite genres of books to read, and any favorites?
Yeah, I generally I read contemporary. Obviously, I read almost every queer YA book that I can get my hands on. Yeah, you can see Simon Versus. That's actually my signed copy of Simon Versus behind me. You know, that's a wonderful example. Yeah, Shadow and Bone is an example of a fantasy series that I really, really love. Definitely like looking in the webcam to get ideas of what to say. I love fantasy, but I tend to really gravitate towards contemporary fantasy and things that are a little bit feel like something that could happen to someone that you know, perhaps. For example, the Cruel Prince series or Cassandra Clare. I really like that kind of vibe. Wilder Girls, you can see that is one of the most fantastic books I've read in quite a while. I'm just trying to think. Ace of Spades, that's the book that I read this year that really, really loved. I said that I read contemporary, and I'm just gonna make a whole bunch of fantasy recommendations, but Legendborn was some of the most beautiful writing I have ever come across. So this is absolutely fantastic. Trouble Girls by Julia Lynn Rubin. That's a contemporary that I really love. That is Sapphic, and it's a Sapphic sort of Thelma and Louise. That's really fantastic. I could go on.
Very good choice. Have you read The Fault in Our Stars?
Yeah, I read that when I was still a teenager myself, actually. That made me sob. I do remember. I remember being a little bit, for whatever reason, I was primed not to like it when I went in. And I apologize to John Green because there was no reason for that. But I think I was going through a teenage phase where I was just a little bit, well, me, I'm not saying all teenagers, but certainly me. I went through a phase as a teenager where I was just like a little bit, cool. Like, okay, let's see what this book's going to be about. And then I couldn't put it down. I was literally tears streaming down my face at like 3 a.m. in the morning, messaging my friend like, oh my gosh, it got really good. How come you picked up The Fault in Our Stars?
It's my favorite book, so it's beautiful and amazing and just great.
Isn't it? It's absolutely fantastic.
Yes. Are there any characters that you have written that you consider yourself close to?
As in characters that feel
Like,
more like me.
yeah.
Yeah. Honestly, every time I write a character, they get a little bit of me. I take parts of me and then I mesh them with parts that are definitely not me to kind of create maybe like a zombie version, or Frankenstein version might be a better analogy. So Ollie from Only Mostly Devastated, he has my sense of humor, absolutely. And just that really dry self-deprecation. He's a lot more shy than me, though. I'm really comfortable in social situations. I will happily just state my opinion, which is very unlike him. But I really love music. I don't play guitar or bass. I'm more of a piano and singing person, but we do share that love of music. Perfect on Paper, Darcy. I used to really love reading about relationship advice, relationship theories. I used to love talking to people about their problems and give my thoughts on the matter, which is, very like her. I would like to think that I haven't hurt people necessarily the same way that she does, without any spoilers, but that's some of her own stuff. She has some family stuff that she has to sort out that I was much more fictional. Ruben from If This Gets Out, he's got my Spanish heritage and just like the more Broadway style of singing, but he's a lot more serious and cynical, I think, than I am personally.
Yeah, I loved all your books so far, so
Really?
looking forward to the next one.
Thank you. So the next one for you is If This Gets Out?
Yes, I have pre-ordered, so...
Oh, really? Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Yes, it's got its little spot on the shelf that it's quite, it's a little bit weird every time I look at the cover because I drew the cover art, which is not something I've obviously done for any other book, and it's not a very normal thing to happen. So every time I see it, it's a little bit like,
Well, that's good then. I'm sure you're a great artist.
Oh, thank you.
What character have you written which you would most like to have as a sibling?
As a sibling.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, Ainsley from Perfect on Paper. She's the big sister of Darcy. Um, there's probably, I honestly, I have the best big sister in the world as it is. So, this would not be replacing my sister. This would simply have to be a three sisters sort of situation to have Ainsley come in. But no, she's great. She's really caring. She's loving, but she's also not afraid to tell you how it is and tease you a little bit, as sisters definitely do.
Yeah, I would definitely like her as a sibling as well. Personally, though I have
Yeah.
a great little brother anyway, so that's fine. If you could pick three fictional characters that you would have as roommates for a year, who would they be?
Any fictional characters?
Any.
Ooh, ooh. Okay. So just gonna I really think that I would have to have Will Herondale from the Infernal Devices series, just because I really like to live with funny people. I like funny people being around me, and I think that that would just be such a fun character to banter back and forth with. Definitely. Oh, what else? I would have Kate from Kate in Waiting, because she is so fun and really into musical theatre. I absolutely love musical theatre myself. I would rope her into filming singing duets absolutely all the time. I would really abuse that situation to the best of my ability. And that sounds like a really fun way to spend a year. And who was a third roommate? This is going to be a very crowded house. How about we just bring in Ollie, just because I'll really understand him, and he can just come in and he'll make some situations a little bit more awkward, but I think that he would also just calm down any fights that were to happen. He would be like the person who intervened if anything got too dramatic. So yes, those are my answers.
Sounds like very good choices. I wouldn't mind living with Ollie as well. He'd be a great person, as well as Kate, because I can't sing, but it would be fun anyway.
Yes, it would. It would. And she would sing for you. So you
Yay!
could just, yay!
Please tell us a bit about your new book coming out with Cale Dietrich. I think I pronounced his name right. Called "If This Gets Out," without
Yeah.
spoiling anything.
Okay, I'm just gonna. So this is it. This is the arc of the book. So can we yeah, there you go. So this one is about. It's not a rom-com. This one is definitely more in the romantic drama kind of sphere, and it follows two members of America's biggest boy band who end up falling for each other and entering a relationship, and they soon come to discover that their management team have no intention of ever letting them announce their relationship to the world. Yeah, so that one, as you mentioned, I co-wrote that with my friend Cale. We've been friends since 2014. He approached me with the idea for the book in late 2019. And yeah, it's so exciting for it to come out. I think, I can speak for Cale's chapters. He's done an absolutely amazing job. He's been a dream to work with. And yeah, it's been out with readers for a few months now. I'm really excited about the response it's getting, and I'm so keen to get it out there and hear what everyone has to say.
Well, I look forward to it, and as I've said before, I have pre-ordered it because I've loved all of your books so far, with my favorite probably being Perfect on Paper, because I
Oh,
relate to Darcy a bit.
really? Thank
Yeah.
you.
Oh, I loved one scene. I think it was the can't spoil it really. It's one scene where everyone's just being nice to her and her having her own bi issues,
I
which
know the
I
same.
love that scene.
Oh, thank you. Well, obviously, well, not obviously, but when it came to Perfect on Paper, I really, really wanted to spend some time talking about biphobia and internalized biphobia and bierasia. So that scene, it was very healing to write that in a lot of ways. And yeah, seeing my editor read it for the first time, and she comes back like, oh my gosh. Yeah, it was really nice to be able to write that. In a way, it was almost like writing it to myself, I suppose. But I think that's one of the things about writing, isn't it? When you really dig deep into emotions that you have or experiences that you have, there are going to be people out there who have experienced the same thing, and it's kind of like that moment of connection of like, wow, I've never met you, but we've both been through a very similar experience.
Yes, I get that as well. It always makes me smile when I read that scene back, because they're saying all the things I've ever needed to hear in about 3 pages.
Oh,
So
I'm so glad. That is exactly what I hoped would happen. So I'm so glad to hear that.
okay. I now Sophie's going to read an excerpt from one of her books.
So I'm going to be reading from If This Gets Out, and I'm going to be reading just the first few pages. So chapter 1, Reuben. Almost plummeting to my death before a stadium full of screaming people is a warning sign, in an endless parade of warning signs lately, that I need more sleep. We're performing the last concert for the American leg of our months by years tour when it happens. I'm about 15 feet above the stage on a raised platform illuminated to look like a city skyline. It's time to gracefully lower ourselves to sit on the edge to croon the start of our last song, his, yours, ours. But instead of gracefully lowering myself, I overshoot my step, overcorrect, and then start lurching over the edge. Before I can lean too far into thin air, a hand clasps my shoulder and steadies me. Zach Knight, one of the other 3 members of Saturday. His hazel eyes widen the tiniest bit, but otherwise he acts unruffled. Nothing to see here. I don't have the luxury of pausing to acknowledge or thank him because stage smoke, intended to represent either clouds or city pollution, I never did figure it out, is engulfing us, and the opening chords of the song have started. Zach keeps his hand on my shoulder while he sings, as though it was all part of the choreography, and I lean into my off-balance pose, totally collected, at least outwardly. After 27 and a half consecutive shows this year alone, this isn't exactly the first time one of us has had to smoothly cover up a trip or a choreo mistake. It is the first time one of those mistakes almost caused me to plunge 15 feet onto solid ground, though, and my heart's probably never pounded quite this hard, but we're a show. To be clear, we aren't giving a show, we are the show. And the show doesn't take 2 minutes to compose itself after almost breaking its neck. The show is suave and in control, and it meant to do that. When Zach's lines are over, he gives my shoulder a quick squeeze, the only acknowledgement the whole ideal is likely to get for now, then drops his hand while John Braxton chimes in for his verse. John always has the most solo parts. I guess that's what you get when your dad also happens to be the manager of your band. We don't really have a leader, but if we did, it would be John. When we have eyes on us, anyway. By the time John's finished and it's my turn to sing the song's bridge, my breathing's more or less steady again. Not that it matters. Every song, without fail, I get given the simplest solos without a high note in sight. Frankly, I could pull them off with a sock stuffed in my mouth. They don't care that I have the highest range out of all 4 of us. For reasons they'll never care to explain to me, they prefer me bland. They being our management team and, to a lesser extent, our record label, Chorus Management and Galactic Records. And God forbid I push against those cramped boundaries with a vocal run or tempo change. We're meant to sound just like we do on the master recording. Planned, packaged, and neatly presented. And that was from If This Gets Out, which comes out in December in the US and January in the UK and the Commonwealth. And that's available for pre-order now, so anywhere that you can buy books.
And finally, where can we find you on social media?
Well, I'm mostly on Twitter, so I'm at @sgonzalesauthor. I'm also on Instagram, and I'm learning. I'm getting better. I'm putting up stories almost every day, which is fun. I'm @sgonzalesauthor on Instagram as well. And I have a website, which is sophiegonzalesbooks.com.
Okay, so I think we have to go now. So thank you for listening, and bye.